Hey, y'all, it's Rick here with Uncommon Communion, wishing you the beginning of our end of summer holiday weekend. I wanted to take a few minutes today to record about two things that are on the calendar today. One is our American history calendar, and the second is our church liturgical calendar. Before I get to that, I want to begin, as we always begin here on Uncommon Communion, by recognizing, realizing, celebrating, affirming, upholding, and leaning into the fact that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of the more and each other. A couple of things today as we get started. First of all, it is the first time that I've had, I think, long sleeves on since I've been recording videos. It's nice and cool where I live here in Central Ohio, and perhaps you're having some cool weather where you are, unless, of course, you're out west where it looks like it is pretty darn hot. Also, this is the first time I've recorded in daylight. The window that I have is over there. But I do have my new ring lighting. It's actually not new, it's old. I've had it for a while, but I just realized, like, wait a second, I can use this to make my videos look even better. And I hope you're finding them to be brighter and hopefully higher in quality of visuals. I wanted to begin on a somber note today. And the first piece of what I want to share about the American history calendar. Today is the 20th anniversary of the devastation, the destruction, the carnage of Hurricane Katrina. And I looked this up and I remember it very clearly. And I needed, though, to look up this number. 1,392 people died officially in that hurricane. And many, many more were displaced, and many lost their homes. What I remember about that day, and I imagine if you are a person of age like I am, you remember that day quite well also, and really those days. Because what I remember about that is that it was one of those times where I was watching live and listening and recognizing that I had never seen anything like this before unfold in front of our eyes as Americans. Also, I recognized that it was a desperate situation and I had no idea how it was going to resolve. There's only two other dates that I can think of in the 21st century that were like that for me. One was September 11th, 2001, right? When watching that in real time and having no idea what was going to happen next. And then more recently, January 6th, 2000 and what was that? 2021, right? And recognizing again, we had never seen this before and wondering how was it going to end. On that day, I had great fear that there would be even more bloodshed, more violence, as the law enforcement cleared out the Capitol. And fortunately, there was not, and I'm grateful for that. So, Katrina, though, what I remember and what I want to hold in thoughts today and in our hearts is just that moment of absolute breakdown. Right? We saw the government breaking down. I remember news anchors who were live there nationally and locally pleading for help and to have help sent because people were dying, right? Were drowning. I remember those scenes in the Superdome, right? That were absolutely horrific of people living as refugees there in their own city. So, by bringing this up and by remembering this, y'all, I want to just use this as a moment of reflection because as things accelerate in this fascist dictatorship that is rising, there are certainly forces that are colliding and friction that is building. And, my sense is that at some point we will probably have again one of those moments we have never seen before. I don't want to predict or speculate or any of that, but what do we do in those moments? And most significantly, how do we work to prevent that from happening again? Right? Those three that I mentioned, what have we done as far as national security, September 11th, hurricane, preparedness and hurricane readiness, protection. And then thirdly, and of the three, y'all, January 6th, in my mind, was the most despicable, the horrific. And we certainly have not done enough. And, that is part of actually, when I mentioned forces building, everything that with the pardons of the January 6ers and all of that is part of that friction that is building. So I start with that on the national calendar and just ask for the memories and the reminders of just keeping that in mind. How did that feel to you? I'd love to hear it in the comments. And what do you remember? Shifting gears to the liturgical calendar. And I know if you saw my post, and quite a few people did a couple days ago, when the Catholic school massacre, murder, mass shooting took place in Minneapolis, you heard me say a lot about Catholicism and that I was a Catholic high school teacher for 18 years. And this time of the year, as going back to school, has a lot of fond memories for me. There were certainly a lot of friction and difficulty as I was changing and the church was changing politically and institutionally in my latter years of teaching in the classroom. And yet there even then there were so many things that were positive. And one of the things that I enjoyed doing the most was celebrating the liturgical calendar with the students, especially these beginning days of the school year, because there's some really important, significant celebrations of saints and moments in the life of what we see in the Gospels right here in these days of August. And for me, it was a wonderful introduction, especially to the freshmen that I taught. And over the course of my career, I think I taught mostly freshmen. And it was a great introduction for prayer in the liturgical calendar and really what I still believe is the best of what the Roman Catholic tradition has to offer. And even though I no longer consider myself a Roman Catholic, I'm a planetary pilgrim on the way of Christ. A big part of that way of Christ aspect is honoring this tradition of the liturgical calendar. So I say all of that because today we remember not a person, a saint or a holy person. We remember an event that focused on a saint, John the Baptist, but we remember an event which is his martyrdom. And I want to read to you part of how Mark describes this unfolding. And I think it is very relevant for our time today, right? When I would read this to the students, I would say what we are seeing here in the Gospels, we're seeing two different visions of power conflicting with each other. We see the moral power, the prophetic power of John the Baptist, and his moral call is what gets him into jail because he confronts Herod, who is representing the earthly power over people, the kingly, authoritarian, what we would call today fascist power over whomever he has as subjects, which is closely related, that word, to subjugated, right? So we are seeing these two powers come together, right? And they come together in a moment that, again, I think is relevant. And when I would read this story to my students, they would get the creepiness, as they would call it, the sickness, the vile nature that Mark describes here. And again, y'all, as we continue, and this is going to heat up next week, Congress comes back next week, and everything is going to accelerate. And that's the way it needs to be. as we continue to push for the release of the Epstein, Trump, Maxwell files, all of them, redacted names of victims, of course, we need to remember that this vile, ogling using of girls has been a long, long part of male power dominance, right? And we see it in this scene. So let me read to you just a little bit of this, and then we will wrap up, because I don't want this to be too long for you as we go into this holiday weekend. So I'm reading to you from David Bentley Hart's New Testament, a translation. And just a little bit about this is he really tries in this translation to keep it authentic to the way the Greek was written, and in structure and in some of the words that he translates. So I turn to this because I think this is a pretty authentic translation to what Mark, who wrote in Greek, was trying to say about this vile scene. All right. So imagine this. John the Baptist is in prison somewhere in the palace where this is taking place. He's there because John has criticized the wife of Herod for being in adultery. So that's how this unfolds. I'm just going to read pieces of the story because you may know it for sure. So it says this: and an opportune day arrived. And opportune in this is that Herod to do something about the John the Baptist problem. And an opportune day arrived when Herod, for his birthday celebrations, produced a banquet for his grandees and the chilarchs and the foremost men of Galilee. And when Herodias's own daughter, this is Herod's stepdaughter, she is definitely portrayed in art and also, I think, in the story as being underage, what we would call underage, a girl, right? And when Herodias's own daughter came in and danced, she pleased Herod and those reclining at table together, right? So again, just see what is happening here. Read into that pleased, dancing, right? The men leering, the men desiring, and Herod, wanting to be grandiose, says, ask me whatever you wish and I will give it to you. Whatever you ask, I will give to you up to half of my kingdom. So he's boasting and bold bragging about his power, right? So she is named Salome. I don't know if it's in the text or in tradition. She goes to her mother and says, well, what should I do, right? And it says immediately she goes there. And she comes back in and she says, I wish that you should at once give me the head of John the Baptist on a trencher, on a platter, a plate, right? And here's the kicker, y'all. And the king, becoming greatly distressed, did not want to refuse her on account of his oaths and of those reclining together at table. So the king was not happy. Herod knew this was not a good thing. And yet he didn't want to back down, because that's how power has to be, right? Power can't apologize. Power can't say that's a mistake, right? And we're seeing that left and right here in the T-Rump regime, right? We're seeing that every single day. And that's a hallmark of this kind of power, especially the boasting power, right? Where you're putting out proclamations left and right on Truth Social and other places. You can't lose face. So what does he do? What does Herod do? And immediately sending word, the king ordered a guard to bring John the Baptist's head. And going away, the guard beheaded him in prison and brought his head on a trencher and gave it to the girl. And the girl gave it to her mother. And that, of course, as you have seen, and I'm going to include here as well, leads to some absolutely grotesque art. And I would show those to the kids as an example of not all art that we have that we would call church or holy or, art of the New Testament is whitewashed and pretty and, benign and so forth, because there's some horrific stories here. And the horrific part of this story, y'all, is not just the beheading, but it's what led up to it. The sickness at the power of this kind of powerful men, young women, and showmanship and boasting and using power. And that's what we're seeing right now. That's what we saw for years, that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, I believe at the very least he knew about it. How could he not? He talked about it. Whether or not T. Rump was doing things with those young girls, that's what we need to find out. But we know others were, other powerful men. So, y'all, I end with this thought before we close. There's protests this weekend. There's rallies this weekend. I'm going to one on Monday, Labor Day, 4:00 here in Columbus. And I hope you do too. This is the next one in the series of ones that are being put on by 5051 and Indivisible. This one is about billionaires, against billionaires, workers. It's Labor Day, right? So much that we can protest there. But one thing I am going to put on one side of my sign, I always do double-sided signs. You get twice as much bang for the buck, right? On one side of my sign, it's going to be release the Epstein files, because next week, stuff's going to start happening. And we need to put that pressure on now, because this has to be done, y'all. It has to be done for justice, for the victims, for truth, for integrity, for our democracy, right? Before we lose it, it must be done. All right, y'all, I'm going to close. I think this is longer than any one I've done. I appreciate your watching. If you made it all the way here, please share this with your friends. Please continue to give me comments. I don't get a lot of comments, and I would love to hear more comments, y'all. So please do. Let's end, as we often do here, with the Serenity Prayer. I call it the we version of the Serenity Prayer. God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, God, not ours, be done. All right, y'all, I'll be back over the weekend, I'm sure. I'm not taking it off from work, but not taking it off from this mission that I have here with you. Thanks for listening. Blessing and good. Be bold and be well.